that is the Bitcoin rabbit hole in a nutshell. Is that, they say fix the money, fix the world. You keep tracing these different social malaises or technological difficulties, lack of innovation. Weinstein's entire Portal podcast. Something went wrong in the early 70s. We went off the gold standard in 1971. And there's a great website, WTFhappened1971.com, goes through this whole gamut of socioeconomic data that's completely gone askew since the early 70s.
Yeah, you had this whole video. What do you think about Eric Weinstein and Bitcoin and the gold standard? And does he? I actually haven't heard him talk about his thesis about the 70s in connection to the going off of the gold standard. Yeah, what are your thoughts there? What are your thoughts about his general relationship with the Bitcoin idea and the community?
Yeah, the first exposure I had to Eric was I think it was his first episode with Peter Thiel. And they're going through that thesis that there's been this general institutional rot and suppression of innovation since the early 70s. And he's trying to identify what it is. I don't think they ever pinned it on the money, on going off the gold standard. But in recent interactions with Eric, I've interacted with him on Clubhouse. We recently released an episode of the show I did with Chris Espley, and it was titled Dear Eric Weinstein. So we're going through his worldview that he's expressed in the portal and tying it back to the money in different ways. And he's engaged. Eric retweeted the show. We've exchanged some messages. He's been very open-minded. He's asked some really good questions. So I get the sense that he's approaching this very wholeheartedly. He does bring with him his existing worldview and his existing theory. The one that really blew up was gauge theory. They got really popular. I don't know a lot about gauge theory. I actually messaged Eric and said I want to learn more, genuinely, because he seems to be serious that needs to be considered in the sphere of money, and so I want to learn more about it. But I think overall it's great. It's great to see an intellectual heavyweight of his caliber gravitating towards Bitcoin.
Yeah, he has some gauge theoretic conceptions about the world broadly, but also about economics, which ultimately boils down to just a set of mathematics which allows you to more effectively reason about the world, and he has a certain set of views there. So it's fascinating to see him grapple with it. I think he's also kind of like all of us, grappling with the idea of what is Bitcoin in this world. It's a very young technology, and it's unclear exactly how the ideas of the past fit with it.
Yeah.
Integrate, how the two integrate together. And so it's interesting to explore, not just Bitcoin, the particular. So for me, like what I've always saw Bitcoin as from the beginning, from a narrow worldview, is computer science, which is where I come from. And so I wasn't almost aware in the social, political, financial aspects of Bitcoin. But now I see that there's not just power, but there's fascinating ideas to explore on that side of things. Not just the computer science, not just the technical details, but the political, the socioeconomic, the philosophical.
Yeah. That's where I, find all the fascination in the world, frankly. I would one other thing about Weinstein and intellectuals more generally that are skeptical of Bitcoin, I would challenge them to read the book Human Action, written by Mises. I think in 1949 he published the English version. It's essentially the Bible of Austrian economics, and I think Austrian economics is a noticeable gap in most modern intellectuals' worldviews. That it's not taught in school. I mean, I have a master's degree in accounting and finance. Studied a lot of economics in school. There's not one peep of Austrian econ.
The elitist Robert Breedlove talking about all the degrees he has.
I was a CPA. But it's that curriculum that we get in college is noticeably deficient in Austrian economics, and I think there's a reason why. Right? It's heavily government influenced. Again, master's degree in accounting. They never taught me about what money is or where money comes from. all you learn is that the central bank issues money and the central bank takes money away. So it's conceived of in the textbooks quite literally as God, right? An entity that suffers no opportunity cost, that basically is the foundation of the entire Keynesian worldview that you're taught in economics. And Austrian economics is the opposite end of the spectrum of that, right? It's actually the culmination, which economics is the youngest science in the world, by the way. So it is kind of the front. It's the frontiers of science in many ways. Like to actually, when I say praxeology, many people have never even heard of that, but it's something. It's an a priori study equivalent to something like mathematics, that you're building things from first principles to reason about economic reality. And I think that book, it's a very difficult book written by Mises, 1,200 pages, translated from German. The way he wields English is fascinating and terrifying all at the same time. It'd probably take you 6 months to read it if you read it daily, seriously. Like it's a beast of a book. But that will plug the gap, I think, in most any intellectual that's skeptical about Bitcoin. I think that will plug the gap that's necessary for you to see it in a new light.
Well, I'll take that as a challenge.